A look at the current state of political campaign ads, and to media correspondent Terrence Smith.
With the debates behind them and less than 3 weeks to go before Election Day, the Bush and Gore campaigns released a cluster of new ads today in hopes of tilting a close election their way.
We want every child to be able to access the greatness of America.
The Bush campaign released this new commercial today, featuring a testimonial from Phyllis Hunter, the Houston reading specialist.
People ask me, why have I followed him so intently in this education and reading? I followed him because he's been a leader.
Reading is the new civil right. It's if you can't read, you can't access the American dream.
The Democratic Party's new ad out today challenges the Bush plan to privatize part of Social Security.
He's promising to take $1 trillion out of Social Security so younger workers can invest in private accounts. Sounds good. The problem is, Bush has promised the same money to pay seniors their current benefits. The Wall Street Journal shows he can't keep both promises. Which promise is he going to break?
Thus far, the ad campaign has focused largely on issues, not character, contrasting policy, not personality, on topics like Social Security, Medicare, prescription drugs, the environment, the economy, and education. But the issue-oriented atmosphere does not mean the tone of the ads is any less aggressive or confrontational. This ad from the Republican National Committee faults the Clinton-Gore administration for what it calls the education recession.
Our students rank last in the world in math and physics, and most fourth graders in our cities can't read. The Clinton-Gore education recession. It's failing our kids.
And this spot from the Democratic National Committee is one of 4 assailing Governor Bush's record in Texas.
Last year, Houston overtook Los Angeles as America's smoggiest city. Now take a deep breath and imagine Seattle with Bush's Texas-style environmental regulation. George Bush, before he talks about cleaning up Washington, maybe he should clean up Texas.
The Bush campaign is running an ad of its own, entitled Trust. It folds all of the governor's key issues into a 60-second ad that makes credibility a cornerstone, mentioning the word trust 6 times.
He trusts government, I trust you. Because when we trust individuals, when we respect local control of schools, when we empower communities, together we can ignite America's spirit and renew our purpose.
This week, the Gore campaign released this ad entitled Prosperity, an apparent response to the Bush campaign's Trust Spot.
Prescription drug coverage for seniors, middle-class tax cuts, individual choice and opportunity, not big government. Al Gore, America's prosperity working for all.
The ad war is being fought on television and radio in a handful of crucial states, including Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, Michigan, and Florida. The total cash outlays on ads by both sides are now roughly equal, some $47 million apiece since the end of the primary season. That includes expenditures from the campaigns, national parties, and advocacy groups through October 8th. Analysts predict that total spending for both sides could run as high as $160 million to $200 million. To assess how the ad competition is playing out, we're joined by 3 close watchers of the airwaves. Today, 2 of them are in the battleground markets of Philadelphia and Detroit. Kathleen Hall Jamieson is Dean of the Annenberg School for Communication at the University of Pennsylvania. Peter Marks is a national correspondent for the New York Times, covering political media. And William Salatin is a senior writer at Slate, the online magazine, where he covers the ad wars in a feature entitled Damn Spot. Welcome to all 3 of you. Kathleen Hall Jamieson, the pace and intensity of the ad wars is really picking up now in the wake of the 3rd debate. When you turn your trained eye on these ads, what strikes you about them? What's noteworthy?
Well, Terry, let me start by telling you something that I think is really important from our national survey of the electorate. You know, we've been following voters since November of last year. We've interviewed over 75,000, and we've been tracking how they learn and what they learn. And on one of the issues in these ads, the public is becoming more confused instead of seeing the issue clarified, and that's what the 2 candidates would do on Social Security. And so it is important to remember that ads are only telling one side of the story. There needs to be a context wrapped around those Gore claims. This is an issue that's consequential to individuals, and it's also consequential to the rest of the electorate. Ordinarily, ads help us spike the learning curve. They don't deflate the learning curve. And in this case, we need a little bit more contextual information to understand those claims about Social Security.
Well, is it, Kathleen, because those ads are frequently in conflict?
When ads are in conflict, we actually are pretty good at sorting out the common themes that each are arguing, because they tend to complement each other in that they tend to stress the strongest point that one can make on each side. And so when both sides are engaging, and they're not now engaging on Social Security, accuracy of information, the electorate is pretty savvy, actually does go up. We've seen it go up, for example, on the 2 prescription drug plans, on the education proposals. On those areas in which there's been engagement in ads as well as in the debates, accuracy is rising. But at the end of the first debate and the end of the last presidential debate, the issue of Social Security was left somewhat hanging with charge and countercharge and no clear arbitration. The press needs to step in and take this complex issue in hand and help people make sense of the implications of the transition cost of moving to some private expenditure, some investment that's private in Social Security in the Bush plan, because that's basically what's at issue here.
Will Salatin, you spend some of your time doing that, trying to sort all this out. When you look at these, are there ads that strike you as particularly effective or deceptive or both?
I think both. I think it's a thin line sometimes between an ad that distorts the truth and an ad that gives you information. But I'm really fascinated by the way that each of these campaigns will take one issue, run an ad on it, and try to frame that issue in a way that touches on other issues. It's a springboard to larger themes.
Give me an example.
A great example of that is the Bush campaign ads and the Republican National Committee ads about education. Now, here's an issue which the Republicans used to treat as just a matter of getting the federal government out of it. Bush is saying, I am for education, I'm for getting involved in education, and he's for taking that issue and touching on other issues that he would otherwise have trouble talking about. For example, the economy. The economy is doing really well. He's running against a virtual incumbent. What can he say about it? Well, he can say we're not in a recession, but we're in an education recession. He can imply that somehow poor education, poor test scores is a leading indicator of economic troubles ahead. Or civil rights. Bush is against affirmative action. We heard that last night. He's against the second hate crimes law that they tried to pass in Texas, or didn't do anything about it. You would think he would have trouble reaching out to blacks on civil rights. So he says reading is the new civil right. So he uses one issue to reach out to others.
Right, and of course he has a African-American teacher.
Right, he has a black woman giving that ad.
Right.
And by the same token, on the other side, the Gore campaign and the Democrats are using one issue to reach out to larger themes. That issue, that ad that they're running on Social Security, notice it doesn't just attack George Bush's Social Security plan. It says, which promise are you going to break? It's trying to branch out from an issue to a larger theme of credibility.
Peter Marks, you're out in the eye of the storm there in Michigan. I gather ads are on all the time. What's it like, and what impression, if any, is it having?
Well, it's interesting, Terry. When you watch TV here, you see it's such an intense race at so many levels in Michigan that it's sort of the rush hour of the campaign, which is a real problem at this point, I think, for the presidential candidates. I see a ton of attack ads at the lower levels. The Stabenow-Abraham race, a bevy of congressional races as well. And you occasionally see Gore and Bush poking through, but I think they've got a problem as this thing intensifies and more candidates at the lower levels. This is the time when a lot of Senate and congressional candidates use their money on TV. It's going to be very hard now for Bush and Gore to get a message through powerfully enough with enough what they call gross rating points to have the kind of impact they could have, say, a month ago. It's going the thing that throws that off balance is that people are paying more attention, perhaps, to every ad. But I'm just noticing that what I see on TV, I'm having a hard time even remembering sometimes that there's a race across the nation as opposed to just in Michigan.
Is there any way to judge, Peter, what effect the ads are having, not just in Michigan? Is there any way to judge that?
There's all kinds of anecdotal, and even there are some polls that are done. In fact, a poll was recently done that showed something like 7 in 10 voters in Michigan were deeply aware of the content of the ads that ran here. But there are counterbalancing polls that show that this year, just as Mark Shields said in the earlier spot, that that there was not much passion showed in the debates. I don't think people sense a lot of passion in this campaign, and certainly not in the ads. And as a result, they don't remember what they're seeing. There's no ad like a Willie Horton ad. There's no really vicious stuff or particularly compelling positive stuff that stays with you the way great television sometimes does. And I think that in the end makes it something of a wash on television.
Kathleen Hall Jamieson, one of the Gore ads that we did not run here tonight invokes the name of Ronald Reagan. Unusual to have a Democrat citing a Republican icon?
The last time that happened was 1964, when a Johnson ad essentially argued that Goldwater wasn't mainstream by trying to ally Johnson with Eisenhower as well as with John Kennedy. The risk in this is traditionally voters think that in foreign policy and military affairs Republicans are better. Probably not the best idea to remind people of work with Ronald Reagan as a result. But if I could add something to what Peter said, when you look at all of the ads, it looks somewhat confusing, but in general, the Democrats are running down the party line ticket, down the party ticket at the other levels on issues much closer and much more consistent with Gore than are the Republicans running with Bush. So in that whole wash of an environment, the identity of the Democratic Party is being more clearly reinforced. There's an advantage there to Gore.
Will Salatin, do you see it that way?
Well, I actually think that it's fairly intelligent of the Gore campaign to be, and the Democratic National Committee to be addressing the question of, to be associating Al Gore with Ronald Reagan and with George Bush on foreign policy.
President Bush.
Yes, President Bush, because Democrats traditionally have looked weak on foreign policy. And it's an advantage to Gore in a lot of states to say, I stood with President Reagan on arms control. I stood with President Bush on the Persian Gulf vote. I think he's reaching out to a lot of states, and I think if you look where those ads are running, he's appealing to a lot of people who would vote against a Democrat who seem to be opposing Reagan and Bush.
Is he, and aren't these ads also projecting a notion of bipartisanship, which the public clearly values now?
Yes, I think he is trying to do that, and I think he's trying to project also, by the same token, on domestic affairs, sympathy for the anti-government posture of the old Republican Party. Bush has hurt him a lot, has hurt Gore a lot on anti-government questions, and now we see in a lot of these Gore ads saying not just I'm for helping you, but I'm for helping you without bringing you bigger government.
Peter Marks, in an earlier conversation we had with you, you suggested that you can track the race by looking where the money is being placed, follow the money in terms of the ads. Can you do that for us now? Where's the money going, and what does it tell you about the race?
Well, where the money is staying is sort of an interesting issue for Gore. He's still spending money in states like Washington, Oregon, Iowa, Wisconsin. If you recall, those are states that traditionally go, at least in the last few cycles, to Democrats. And the fact that he's still in those states and spending substantially doesn't particularly bode well for his strategy in terms of trying to branch out. What he was doing earlier was spending a lot in Florida. He's pulled back money there a little bit, and Bush is spending much more there, and that was an indication that that he was giving Bush a run for his money there. You've still got the concentrations in those states that we've been in for 6 months: Michigan, Pennsylvania, Missouri. Those are still the states where it's going to happen. The Republicans now have more money. They've held back, and they also had more money in reserve. So they're widening a bit. They're going into California. That may just be a tactic to try to draw Gore to spend money there. They're in Minnesota. They're in West Virginia. Again, these are states on the Democratic side, not on the Republican side. It indicates you can feel that in the last few weeks the momentum has shifted, and now that Gore is playing catch up.
And Peter, you're right next door to Ohio. What's the situation there? Obviously a key state.
We've reported that Gore and the Gore people were considering, or very, very seriously considering, pulling money out of Ohio, or at least reducing their stake there, primarily because the polls are showing him falling behind. And the same thing was happening in Louisiana.
Do you go so far as to say they're ceding the state?
Well, I think that I don't think anybody is ceding any state, and this thing has switched so many times in this race. There's such a small margin here that who knows where it's going to be in a week.
Kathleen Hall Jamieson, the ads now seem more sharp-edged, more confrontational. Is that inevitable in this last stage of the campaign?
Yes, it is. It's also inevitable, however, that we're going to retain a pretty high level of accuracy and contrast, because remember, we still have those moderate and independent voters who don't like illegitimate attack, and in a close race they could be decisive.
So you think they have to be careful to be right and strike the right temper?
Yes, and I think they also need to stay on consequential issues and look at your opening piece. Those are consequential issues. This is actually a very good presidential race in which the candidates have stayed focused, are largely engaged, have stayed on consequential issues, and engaged in a reasonable amount of contrast. And as we show in Everything You Think You Know About Politics and Why You're Wrong, voters like that, and it mobilizes them. That's good news for the electorate.
A few seconds left, Will. What do we have to look forward to?
Well, I think what we have to look forward to is an ad campaign on two levels. There's going to be the negative ads that are running under the radar. The Republican National Committee running ads saying Al Gore's for big government, he's bad. And meanwhile, these very nice ads on the surface with George W. Bush saying, I don't trust government, I trust you.
Very effective. Thank you, all three, very much.